thank you, Bill. Thank you, Carl. And thank you all for being here. Happy to have the opportunity to share a little bit about the topic of the day, AI for retail. I got to have lunch with some folks out here, and what struck me was it's interesting. It's like, who are all these people? Is this just a cross-cut of different industries? And I go to a lot of events. I was really taken back by, y'all are just all over the map, like in a good way. And so, because part of when I do these things, I'm like, all right, who am I talking to? What's the audience? And again, there's a lot of diversity of kind of background and professionalism and whatnot here. So, I don't know, this might resonate with some of y'all, and some of y'all might be like, I don't give a shit what you're talking about. But let's get into it. So, Bill mentioned a little bit about my background. I don't think this clicker is working. Could you flip it from your side? Yeah. Sure. So just a quick background on me. And I only have 20 minutes. I like to keep this engaging. So any questions that you have or comments or you want to disagree and throw tomatoes, I'm here for all of that. So my goal is to leave as much time as possible to get into some of this. Way back, I studied kinesiology. My fascination is on the human body and mind and why we do what we do, which has nothing to do with AI and retail. Or maybe it does. I stumbled early into kind of entrepreneurship, and I co-founded 3 companies, ended up stumbling into Nike, I was an innovation partner with for a while, and I left last year. I'd been serving on boards of public and private companies and doing sort of executive strategic advisory type work, and I went all in on that. So that's my main gig now. I've done work with a couple different companies and whatnot. So to kind of set the stage before we get in here, like I mentioned, long run at Nike. So a lot of my perspective is influenced by Nike, which the interesting thing about Nike is it's a brand and a retailer. And inside of this massive machine, there's not really a separation. You're not really sure where one starts and the other ends. And Nike has owned and operated physical retail doors and operates through wholesale partners where our product will be on their shelves. And then we have another model where other people entirely, like the 7,000 stores in China, you'd walk in and say, oh, this is a Nike store. It's operated and run by not Nike, by a different company. So, but in the retail space, I tend to think about sort of two spectrums, let's call it, where you have kind of the front of the house where the consumer sees and experiences the retailer, and the back of the house, supply chain, where product is made and moved. And then you have physical and digital. So nothing rocket science there, but I feel like as we get into talk about where AI can make a sense, you have to separate the two. And I'll just give you one quick anecdote why. If you look at an e-commerce business, you go on to Nike.com or any other site, pretty much everything you do has data attached to it. We can see what you looked at, how long you were there, what you ended up buying. That's easy. So there's almost so much data there, bless you. There's so much data that you just need some good data scientists, some good consumer insights folks, and you can make better, faster, smarter business decisions. In a physical retail side, if I walk in and look at this shoe and then look over here, unless you have cameras that are tracking my eye movement, you don't really know as much. So the data is not there. So I wanted to start with just kind of a couple of these broader themes because the highlight here is that I don't know that the retail industry in general is ready for what AI can do today. And AI is moving quickly. The applications are evolving incredibly fast, faster than I believe most retailers are able to ride the wave and actually drive value from these new tools. They might grab them and chase these shiny metal objects and implement them and then say, this didn't do anything. I don't know if I did that to the slides. Okay, so you have physical and digital, and you have front of the house and back of the house, and we're gonna talk about those a little bit differently. There's two, to kind of, before we dive into AI, there's two main things that I think all consumers want today, and that's personalized experiences and speed. Amazon has spoiled all of us. It's spoiled me. First thing I do, Amazon, Prime. It's gotta be Prime. 2 days is my max. Anything more, I'm not even looking at it. I don't even want to consider it. And personalization is know me to serve me. And this ties back also to, in a retail setting, when you come in as an unknown entity, you're essentially a stranger. Unless you know and you've built a relationship with a retail employee, they don't know who you are. They don't know, are you married? Do you have kids? What job do you do? Are you a runner? What do you do? They don't know any of that. So, know me to serve me, and I want it now. And the know me to serve me aligns to the front end consumer in retail store experience, and the speed is the back of the house. No retailer exists without a product to sell. And I look at retail as super broad. If you sell a tangible product, you're a retailer. That includes electronics, grocery, footwear, apparel, sports equipment, everything. So I take retail as the broadest sense of it. I want to quickly touch on unified commerce and contextual commerce, terms that are kind of thrown around broadly. Unified commerce, I think about in terms of the seams between the shopping experience. So as consumers discover and search for product, whether it's online or in a store, and ultimately decide what they buy, transact, and receive their product, whether it's there or it's shipped to them, those are all handoffs. Those are all seams. Unified commerce is not being able to feel those seams from a consumer standpoint. Sorry about that. And contextual commerce ties back to personalization. Know me to serve me. So we talked about retail in a physical standpoint and a digital standpoint. You've all probably heard the term omni-channel. And I believe that now we're in sort of like an infinite channel. So we're going to talk a little bit about social commerce. I don't know if I'm doing that. This clicker is also not working. But contextual commerce is, what are all the things you're doing before you get to me? So where do you hang out? Who do you talk to? What online forums are you part of? The contextual commerce is, do you have all of the context around each individual consumer so that you can serve them personally and quickly? Could we go back a couple of slides? Okay, right there. Maybe it was me that did it. Sorry. Social commerce. I'm going to move quicker because I want to leave time for questions. Social commerce is insane. It's a huge growth opportunity. I'll throw out a couple numbers. In 2024, there was like 72 billion done in social commerce, and that's like 6.9% of all e-commerce. That's just in the US. TikTok Shop has grown so insanely fast. They started TikTok Shop in September of 23, and in last year, the calendar year 24, they did 9 billion in sales after essentially starting up in 2 to 3 months. They're not the biggest. Facebook has, I think, 41, Instagram 29, and TikTok Shop now has about 16% of all social commerce. 100 million people last year. So 1 in 3 people in the US transacted on social commerce. I don't know if you all shop on TikTok Shop or Instagram. I don't. I'm a girl dad, and my kids, I won't let them have phones, but if they did, I know they would be shopping on there. So it kind of scares me. A lot of growth opportunity there. And then the last thing I'll talk about here on this slide is data as the weakest link in this. And I talked to a couple folks earlier. AI is only as good as the data that it leverages. In retail, there's not a lot of data. I talked a little bit about the front of the house, where I'm looking, what products I'm looking at. There's no data for that. And so, again, this is why I think a lot of retailers aren't ready for what AI can do today. And so if you're in the AI business, it's just I hope this is a good maybe context setting on what you need to potentially be thinking about offering these retailers that might not yet be ready for where you are. So how do you kind of, I want to say tone it down, but meet them where they are. Let's say it that way. Okay, so this is a bit of a boring slide, but this is kind of more back of the house. When you think about all of the items that are sold at retail need to be made and ultimately moved. And that's the boring, unsexy side of the business. But there's a huge opportunity there for AI because going back to all of those seams, there's a ton of seams here. All of the work it takes to bring product to a retail setting, it's insane. I'll give you just one little stat on this. This is just a very small piece of it. From a footwear standpoint, so if you've ever purchased shoes, to make those shoes, generally between 400 and 800 different people have touched that shoe just on the manufacturing line, just to make that shoe. Before then, the box gets into cartons, gets into, and gets put on ships and trains and whatnot to be moved around the world. So there's a lot of people and a lot of steps involved in this. But a couple areas in the back of, the back of the supply chain where there's opportunity is third-party data. So as a quick example, if I've got a Nike store in Chicago and a Nike store in LA. And LA is, for some weird reason, having a cold spell. In Chicago, it's pretty warm there. And all my hoodies are in Chicago, because it's supposed to be cold in Chicago, but actually all those hoodies need to be in LA. That doesn't happen today. But that third-party data in the form of weather forecast, could you then use that to forward deploy that inventory and say, hey, Chicago, LA store here, we need some of your hoodies because you're not gonna sell them and we're ready to sell them. So is this an area where AI can come in and say, hey, look, based on third-party data, we suggest, or we're just automatically gonna reallocate this data, inventory from, in this case, Chicago to LA. Again, this is not happening today. I'm just offering as an idea on where I think there's value and opportunity today. The other one I'll mention, which is wrapped in here as well, is from a supply chain standpoint, fulfillment and logistics. So once the product leaves its point of origin or wherever it was made and it's put on a boat or it's put on a plane, how can you have transactability on that inventory to reroute it, if you will, based on weather, based on changing tariffs, based on where are there shipping lanes that are becoming congested and things are getting stuck. So again, this is the back, like the unsexy side of the business that consumers don't think about unless you're in the business. That's another area where if you pull all this data on where the inventory is and what's going on in the world, how you can sort of have smarter inventory. This is just a little visual that if you think about product from a supply chain standpoint, starting all the way upstream with cotton farming. And part of the point I wanted to drive with this slide is most cotton farmers, I venture to say all of them, they're not using data. They don't have sensors out in the field where the cotton is being grown and but when you have data connectivity from seed to sale, essentially cotton seed to the sale of the product, now you can start looking for opportunities between the seams where you can run a smarter business. The other point I wanted to mention here is just sort of an industry dynamic that if you're in this space, you might already understand, but most products are made, and certainly in Nike's case, through contract manufacturing. It's not owned and operated. And what that largely looks like is Nike will go and say to their tier one factory partner, I need this amount of these things, give me a price, and then I will take them. Everything that happens before that, it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. I don't care, you do. And so these manufacturing partners, tier one, are not necessarily thinking about what data do I need to run a smarter business. They're like, I've got the orders, I've got the money. I don't need to work really hard. I'm not incentivized to innovate or do things differently. So it's just an important industry dynamic that's not universal, but it's also, for all of us, whatever business that we're in, it's where we're climbing an uphill battle in some ways, just because of the relationship dynamic within that industry. I don't know if these slides are going to be shared, but Bill, I'm happy to, because we're not going to be able to get through all of them. The last one I want to mention, and then I'll just sort of open it up, is, and this is where I was talking about empathy with somebody at lunch, and this is, I think, for me, going back to where I started, my fascination with the human mind and spirit, is it's easy to get caught up in sort of the shiny metal object of retail or product or AI, and then stop and say, well, why are we doing any of this? And I've found that in the work that I've done in my career, I've always sort of centered around the humans, and I don't know if that's something I learned or that's just who I am, but I found that I think that's attributed largely to the success that I've seen, and I hope that the accelerant to AI, artificial intelligence, will be AI, authenticity, and imagination. And I think each of us, what unites all of us in here across all of our careers and professions is that the lowest common denominators, we are all humans, and we are beautiful and complex and messy and imperfect, and we're driven by emotions. And so AI will be accelerated or held back by our ability to imagine the future and then start applying AI and other technologies to it to create a better version of what we see in the world today. And I'll leave it there. So I know we do have some time, but I'd love to open it up for other folks.
Thank you, Greg. Open for questions. Yes, thank you. We have questions in the crowd. We have a few minutes for questions, Q&A.
Or disagree, fight me.
How are you guys utilizing AI in the e-commerce side with Nike, especially retail?
Yeah, so when I stepped away last year, Nike was still pretty early in their AI journey, but I think one use case where there's a huge opportunity and Nike was starting to look at this is search, so product search. When you're on site, I mean, the worst thing in the world is to go to click on that magnifying glass, punch in something and get a null, get no response. That happens still, and that's a problem. And I think that's a beautiful area where AI can help in a big way. TikTok's recommendation engine, like Nike's not using this. I don't know many big companies that are. They have an insane recommendation algorithm that ties into product search that y'all should look at.
I have a question about the lack of data. So when you were speaking about it, you were talking more of like brick and mortar data, right? Because you only have point of sale, what have you. What opportunities do you foresee there? Like, do you have cameras in the stores tracking movements? Like, what are you thinking?
I do. I mean, I'm a little bit more risk open in this way, that if I'm in your store, I don't mind, and this is personal preference, right? Privacy and whatnot. I don't mind their cameras that are tracking my eyes, or if I'm talking to you and maybe you work there, is your device doing facial recognition on me and says, actually, we now know who this guy is and we can tie it to his online shop history. Hey, go recommend these other things to him because we know he searched for it, and our recommendation algorithm says he will be super happy if you offer this product to him. So I think tying AI and now having data from vision systems, I think is a huge opportunity.
I have a follow-up question.
Yeah.
Okay. So with that in mind, looking at product development in the future, how do you foresee incorporating social data and then your standard panel research and then sales data? Like how does AI play into combining? Because there's huge amounts of data, just not in brick and mortar.
And we say to develop like new physical product inventory.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Or even just top of funnel marketing campaigns.
I mean, again, I agree. I think these are also, it's another huge opportunity there where this is where like some big corporate ego comes in and they're like, hey, we've got our own product designers and developers. Like we know what the customer wants. It's like, well, time out. The customer is speaking, but are you really listening? Are you tapping into all of this data? Even if you just go on like Reddit or like social media, there is a lot of data to be harvested there to make better product or to market better or to speak in a more culturally relevant way to your consumers. I made the joke, it kills me, and it's happened more than once, where I'll talk to, you know, somebody's in their early 20s, mid-20s, like, oh, Nike, cool, that's my dad's brand. And I'm like, oh, and it just breaks my heart because that's not what Nike wants to hear, right? You're no longer culturally relevant.
All right, any more questions?
Yeah, right here, right here.
Okay,
Well, just drafting off of that question, I think we all know that there's a lot of data silos and a lot of businesses operate with scattered data across their POSs, CRMs. What's the trend for a lot of mid-market enterprises to consolidate that data so that there could be more useful, smarter decision-making, predictive analytics, so that they can scale and become more efficient in their operations? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
In terms of like data sharing across company?
Or just data consolidation across
Yeah.
all these various systems?
Yeah, I mean, I love it. I think the biggest challenge though is, you know, data privacy issues, especially with users. And I'd be curious to see where that goes in the next, 4 years, if there are changes there. But I think that's probably the biggest holdup there is, what's the data and who's giving access to it. But I think it's a great idea.
thank you, Greg. Thank you so much. Greg Merrill, everybody.